Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. I am your co-host, Pete Chianca, here with Dave London. Hiya, Dave.
Hey, Pete.
We have reached the fall season. It is November as we speak. Although it's not exactly fall weather. Like it was like it's cool today. I think it's gonna be 75 on Wednesday. It was like
It's
78 on
it,
Halloween.
the world is just amok.
One of those. One of
It's
those
one of
cool
those.
days.
It is election eve. Tomorrow is election day, and the people watching this, by the time they watch or listen to this, there will be a new president installed, or the world will have ended. So one or the other.
Hey, right, right. I'm so jealous of those people because they know how this all worked out.
To you
Regardless, we're
people,
doing
to you people in the future, hope it's okay.
yes, yes. You have our congratulations or our condolences. One of the two. But we're doing our best to sort of keep distracted with other activities. Like you, Dave, this past weekend, you were at a big event down in Rhode Island. You want to tell the folks about that?
A big event in the smallest state, Rhode Island Comic Con, which is probably second to San Diego as far as the sort of the size of Comic Cons in our country. I think San Diego is probably the largest. New York is also pretty large as well, but Rhode Island gets a huge convention every year around this time in November. It runs for 3 days. I was there for two of them. I was there for Saturday and Sunday, but it actually goes from Friday to Sunday. And it's what you would expect a Comic Con to be, a lot of pop culture, a lot of celebrities where you can, take your picture with, Michael J. Fox for a second mortgage, things like that.
Right, right. Did you see any celebs while you were around there?
I walked by the $6 million man, Lee Majors. He looked pretty good for somebody who's, 105 years old.
I was gonna
Uh,
say, I mean, we watched
um,
his show when we were young children, and that was a
right,
long
right.
time ago.
But no, they get a lot. They had a whole Star Trek contingent there. So like Riker and Worf were there. They both look good. Michael Dorn and uh, whoever plays Riker, that guy.
Yeah, that guy,
Right,
Jonathan Frakes.
right, Jonathan Frakes. So, but so the area, so it's in the Rhode Island Convention Center as well as some satellite locations. So the area where I was in, it's called Artist Alley, and sort of the massive room with a lot of different spaces. And so I was in the part where there's a lot of original art, but you also have, people selling lightsabers and swords and all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the room where I was in was some celebrities, but also the upstairs from where I was, is a whole nother room just gets filled with the celebrities too. So every once in a while, I just sort of take a walk around, kind of see who's there.
Right. And you were there with the National Cartoonist Society, right?
I was there with the National Cartoonist Society, who we get a booth every year to present our wares and sell books, T-shirts, comics, and what have you. So it's all different cartoonists selling. Like in our case, we sold Pet Peeves books. Will Henry was there, who is the cartoonist with Wallace the Brave, and he was selling his books. Mark Parisi, uh, Tim Jones, Chuck Dillon, and so on and so forth. But one of the funny things, so we're each selling our own products. So there's one woman comes up to me. She must have been with her grandson. She walks up. She goes to me, Garfield, and I got confused. I'm like, what is it you want? It's like Garfield. Like she had never spoken to a human before. I'm like, I don't draw Garfield. I'm like I would love to be Jim Davis and draw Garfield, but
That was your opportunity to say, yes, I'm Jim Davis. It's my pleasure. For
so
$50, you could have my autograph and a sketch of Garfield.
I know. I just sort of said I don't draw Garfield. I think I probably should have said we're not a bookstore, man. But or I'd say, yeah, here's Garfield. This is the new Garfield. See, it's a dog, but it's kind of fun. You see all the people and they're different. Everyone's dressed as different characters. Big for some reason, Velma was a big one. A lot of from Scooby Doo.
Yeah, yeah, that's I think some of them are like more adult oriented, I guess, and some are more kid
Yeah.
oriented, and Velma sort of runs the gamut.
Yeah, but a lot of it's sort of manga and anime, which I couldn't even tell you who they were. I mean, I sort of vaguely recognize some of the characters from the shows my kids watch. But then there's some people who get pretty creative. There was one guy as a Santa carrying around like a chimney and um a mantle, which
Mhm.
you know, kind of odd because you have to like literally carry around that thing for the whole day. Like, I mean, so I didn't quite understand that, but it's fun. It's a great event. Just a lot of fun hanging with the cartoon. The best part is frankly hanging with the other cartoonists from the National Cartoonist Society. On Saturday, we had this thing called Quick Draw. We actually had Hillary Price, who does Rhymes with Orange,
Mhm.
and she was the MC. And it's almost like charades, but for cartoonists. So it's a dedicated room for the show where we get up there and she shouts out sort of prompts, and you have to draw the different prompts, and then you get the audience also doing prompts, and it's just kind of fun, sort of getting up there and meeting the people and drawing for them in front of the stage.
There at least you were all probably on similar, equal footing as all professional cartoonists. But that reminds me of see, Dave and I met in college, and I remember once there was like, 5 or 6 of us playing it was called Pictionary, right?
Pictionary,
That
yeah.
was the big game back there where you had to draw the clues. And the clue was something like uh, dreaming. And and I got this stick figure, I got a bed, but it looks like a slab of concrete. Dave is drawing the guy in the full nightgown with the sleep hat, there's sheep jumping over his head. It was just not fair. I was clearly outclassed.
I remember that. But the irony is, if you're a cartoonist and you take the time to do that, it actually is detrimental because you're not quick. You're not. The key is to be quick and get the image and the idea across,
Yeah, you still won
soon.
though, as I recall.
I did win. I did
Your
win, but
team,
that's
your
okay.
team did just clean up.
So, yeah, and then I guess on depending on when people are watching our podcast right now or listening, we do have another event coming up next weekend. We're going to KidsCon New England, which is a fantastic event that runs twice a year, once in Portland, Maine, once in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the Portland one. So probably by the time our viewers either see or hear this, it'll be over. So we'll just say it was a fantastic event. It was a lot of fun. It went over really well. We
It
did
was
great.
great. It was great as always. And if it wasn't, you'll never know.
Sure.
Um, or maybe we'll turn this podcast around really fast and you will get to hear it before we go. But yes, I will be at that one as well, and that's always a good time for the younger kids.
So I guess without further ado, shall we get on to this is our special guest?
That's right. We have two today for our 51st episode of Strip Search. It's a team one we know well, Mark Parisi and his writing partner, Kim Tomsic. They have written a book together. Um, and we are going to talk to them about how that happened and what you need to know about it. So if we're going to take a quick break of about 30 seconds, and we will be back to talk to them here on Strip Search. Stay tuned, everybody. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. I'm your co-host, Pete Gianca, here with Dave London, and we are at our favorite part of the show where we welcome our special, in this case, guests, plural. First, our old friend Mark Parisi is the cartoonist behind the nationally syndicated panel Off the Mark, which has been making people laugh for almost 40 years. 40 years! We'll talk more about that later. And he's also the author and illustrator of the Marty Pants series for HarperCollins. Kim Tomsic is a prolific writer and fan of children's literature. She's known for the novels The 1111 Wish and The 12th Candle and nonfiction books like The Elephants Come Home. Mark and Kim, welcome to Strip Search.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it's so great to see you. Now we know, of course, Mark. This is probably his third or fourth time on the podcast, so we know a lot about Mark. Some might say we know too much, but so Kim, let's start with you. We're going to be talking about your new book, The Truth About Fifth Grade, that you two worked on together. But have you always wanted to be a writer, and how'd you get there? How did it start for you?
Oh, great question. Thank you. I didn't know that I always wanted to be a writer. I plagiarized my first book, copying my sister's book about some cloud. So I thought that would be just the future career for me, and then set that aside. Somewhere in my early 20s, I forced two friends to work on a story with me, like what, not a story, but it was more 365 great dates that you can have in Arizona. And I would schedule meetings and let's do this. That went nowhere. And then also in the early 20s, I wrote a very didactic, lessony, like you decide picture book, trying to tell kids like, should you cross the street? Terrible, terrible. So that went nowhere. And then when my kids were little, I read to them every night, was fascinated by the books that they were reading for their age group. And I realized, oh, I think I have a 12-year-old voice living in my head. And my son and I ran out of Richard Peck books. And so I thought, oh, I'll write a book just like Richard Peck, who wrote Here Lies the Librarian, The Teacher's Funeral, some really funny, A Long Way from Chicago books. And I realized there's only one Richard Peck, but I got started seriously then, started attending conferences, went to the SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, their international conferences, met Richard Peck there, and it's been history since.
That's awesome.
So now how did you and Mark connect to write this book? Tell us the story.
Okay, my version of this story is
Ooh, I can't
Right.
wait.
Right.
We'll
It will
get-
be
we'll get both
appropriate for us to
versions.
get two versions.
that's right.
Incidentally, given the
My
subject matter.
version of
Go
this
on, go on.
story is I was contacted by my agent who said HarperCollins would like you to team up with Mark Parisi and write this story. So it was the first time I've been approached by the publisher. Usually I'm pitching books and, 1/10 of them are accepted and the others are like, no, thanks, no, thanks, no, thanks. So suddenly they're coming to me and I was wondering, well, what's the catch? What do you mean they want us to write a book together? And who's this Mark Parisi fella? And then I, of course, looked and, Mark is hilarious. And I got on a phone call with the editor from HarperCollins, Dave Linker. Mark, did you work with Dave on Marty Pants?
Yes.
Yeah, so I thought that was the situation. And it just seemed delightful, to say the least, especially because we were coming right up at the end of 2019. It was December 2019 when I got this call. So to go into the pandemic working on this book together was such a gift, a lovely distraction. Anyway, so that's how I got the word, like, hey, do you want to do this? Easiest yes of my life.
And I guess, to be fair, it's like a police procedural. You're like in one room, I got Mark in the other room. Mark, Kim just told us her story. Do you want to give us your version of the events? So you want to just adopt Kim's story, or do you want to add
Well,
to
no, well, we actually bumped into each other at a strip club and we started talking. No, her
Mark,
stories
we discussed that.
similar to mine, where except I heard from Dave Linker, who I had worked with Marty Pants, and he had this concept for a kind of a he said, she said book. And the original concept was actually a little different. The idea, which it sounded great, but it didn't work in practice, was that the girl, which would have been Kim, would write an entire diary, and then the boy, Alex, would find the diary and go in and write corrections on each page. So you would read it, read her version and read what he corrected, but it was kind of unreadable. You could not there was so much jumping around, but the concept of the he said, she said was too good to let go. So we kind of put our heads together and came up with this like one page each, or one entry each, alternating throughout the book. And it turned out to be a lot of very challenging at first. I don't know what you thought at first, Kim, but it was like,
100%.
what have I gotten myself into?
Right, because we couldn't find an entry point. So with that concept of scratching it out, we couldn't find an entry point of how will this make sense to the reader, what's happening. And it was, as Mark said, way too much information to take in. Are you trying to also read what was scratched out, and that where does the story come together? So then it was challenging, a lot of false starts, if I remember correctly. How about this? How about that? Okay, this.
Yeah.
And
Like
you
she
were
said.
pretty chill about it, whereas I'm like, okay, how about that? This idea. All
Oh,
right.
the chill thing's all an act.
Well, but you were such a good actor.
But like,
Academy Award.
well, like Kim said, we've been working at it since 2019. Like it's been, there have been a lot of false starts. And then like the pandemic just backed up everything. Production was like, oh, it's going to be released next summer. Oh, did I say next summer? I meant the summer after that. Oh, did I say the summer after that? I think it's the
Next
summer
one.
after that.
I mean,
Exactly.
it's interesting that the idea was pitched to you. It was a really clever idea, and the way you finally wound up executing it is just so funny, because you just want, you're reading it and you just want to say to the two of them, "Can we get you two in a room together to talk about this?" Because this is it's very frustrating, because there's a lot of sort of missed opportunities for them to understand where the other one is coming from. But of course, if you did that, there'd be no book. You need to see it all play out. So I'm just really curious, like him, did you write a chapter and send it to Mark, and then Mark, you wrote the next chapter? Like, how, was there an outline prior to that? How did you sort of do that sort of responding to what had been written about previously and make it work all the way through to the end?
Mark, I can't remember how we finally decided on the storyline. So maybe when you answer, you can answer that. But what we decided we would do is we would share a Google Drive, which is such a vulnerable place to be as a writer, to show Mark my messy, clunky, awkward ideas and writing style before I've had a chance to like do 50 rounds of polish. So it was just like, here I am, here's the authentic me, really trying to find how this goes. So I would put a page up, or an entry up, and then Mark would go into the Google Drive and have kind of a cause effect, like, well, whatever happened here, he's gonna see whatever I might have teed up to flip it on its head.
When you
Yeah,
first
that's
started, I thought you were going to say it was a benefit to have a Google Drive because you can collaborate, but then you went kind of 180 from where I thought you were going.
Well, yeah, 100% of benefit, because we could see it anytime at any moment and know, oh yeah, that person's working on it. This is moving, something's happening. The collaboration portion of that is a huge benefit. It's just when you first start, like, is Mark gonna think, how could I have ever teamed up with her? I don't care what the previous book show. So that it was a very vulnerable place. And then that vulnerability just went out the window because Mark just never dogged my ideas. He would just go with it, or he would, talk about me behind my back, which was great because I didn't know.
No, I mean, it worked out well because I didn't even read her stuff. I just wrote what I wanted to write. No, I mean, the only way it could work was with the Google Drive, because you needed one single document. You couldn't have one person over here, one person over here, and then try to keep track of who changed what. So once we figured that out, I felt a lot better. I'm like, okay, this can work. It's not going to be as mind bending as not that it wasn't, but that I thought it was going to be. And so we would go in. Yeah, she would write something, and it was random. I wouldn't know when she would go in, and she wouldn't know when I would go in. You just go back and see if anything has changed, and then write your part and see what she would follow up with, and then kind of, and then sometimes you have to back up and see, okay, did she change anything? Because that would affect what would happen the next day. But we did have a rough outline. I think it was on a phone call, all three of us, Dave, you and I, and we talked about how he would read her diary and she would be aware of it, and she would start kind of playing with him that way. And we didn't have I think we had pretty much maybe the beginning and the conflict and maybe the end figured out, but we didn't really know what was going to go in between there. That would just kind of flowed as we were writing.
True. I'm a huge fan of Save the Cat, the 15 beats that Blake Snyder talks about in his really self-published book that screenwriters are
Mhm.
wild about, that has been adapted into novel writing. And I've always been a fan of looking at those 15 story beats, just so that, are you delivering a satisfying story at a satisfying almost pace? Of course, the pace, I had to work on my portion because I have a lot to say. But I think the 15 beats were really helpful. And Mark's like, okay. Do you remember me trying to present to you the 15 beats, Mark?
I should say yes, but
Exactly. That
I
was
was
your
just
reply.
going to
You're like,
ask you what other,
okay.
yeah, I have to read this book.
So, okay, so now let's talk about the cartooning aspect of it. So I take it there wasn't a lot of, controversy of who's gonna do the cartoons, or Kim, were you in the running there? Did Mark beat you
I
out for
was
that? Or-
never in the running, but I do have a confession. I wanted to be in the running so desperately. I wanted to be able to have cartoons. And I try to just quietly pop in a cartoon, and they would be like, "Oh, Kim, isn't that sweet?" Because I don't know how to, I don't know how to do that. You cartoonists are brilliant because you know how to make the synapses in the brain just like fire. Instead of laying everything on the nose, you leave that space. Instead of closing the circle, you make the C, so that we have to get to the punchline also.
That's a really good
And
description right there.
thank you.
What you
And
just did.
I mean, I admire it. I see it. I don't know how to do it, but man, did I want to do, I even tried to turn in a cartoon to our editor, and he's like, "Can we have a phone call?" I said, "Sure." He's like, "How about if we let Mark do the cartooning?" And I was like, "You mean the Reuben Award-winning cartoonist? We should let him do it and not me?" All right. So yeah, thanks for bringing up that sore subject,
Well, I
David.
think what one of the reasons was our voices are so different in this book, which is one of the things I like about it. Like two authors, like one author doing those two voices doesn't make sense to me because they're so different. And I think with you doing cartoons, it would have kind of been a similarity. But the doodles, I thought the doodles were brilliant. I love it. Looks so
Thank you.
authentic with just doodles all over every page. I thought that was a great direction to go
That was me never giving up wanting to draw something.
in.
So thank you for,
So
thank
the
you.
Found your
the
voice.
doodles were yours.
Yes,
Okay, that's good to
the
know.
doodles are me, and proudly so.
So Mark, let's talk about this. So as far as I'm aware, as long as I've known you, you've drawn your own material. Is this the first time you've drawn somebody else's material?
Well, I didn't really draw Kim's material because I illustrated my part of the story. Actually, Kim, I don't know if you remember, but you asked, like, could you illustrate? Do you remember this? You said, "Oh, could you draw like Charlie's version?"
I don't even remember,
Oh, and
but
I'm like,
I
no,
won't call
I
you a
don't think
liar
I didn't
here.
think that because I don't think I could change my style enough. It would always I would try, and then by
Oh,
the end of the book, it would come right back to
I kind of have a
my
vague
style.
memory in
Mhm.
my lobbying for cartooning. I just didn't. Here was the big deal to me. Mark's pages are so fun and so funny. I didn't want Charlie's pages to just be like flat, words only, no extra oomph behind them. And so I do remember wanting something else. And so hence the continued lobbying effort until I could draw hearts on my pages or whatever.
That's very good. See, I didn't. We thought it might have been Mark doodling the heart. So now we know there was a division of labor there. So
That's right.
that's good to know. Now, in terms of the characters, one thing I really liked is it had this really strong boy-girl friendship, which I feel is not necessarily something you see in kids' books or middle grade novels. Like there's like the trios, like Harry Potter, like with two guys and a girl, two girls and a guy, or whatever, or the crushes or whatever. But this was just seemed to me to be just a very strong friendship. But was that sort of like by design, or is there a plan in the sequel to, you know, get them together like Sam and Diane? Like what is the thinking sort of behind their relationship?
I think that came from Dave. I think he wanted them to be friends. There was no romance involved, and I like that idea. They're just like, because I wondered at some point, are people going to be looking at the end of the book for them to get together? But like, there was never a point where that was even hinted at. It was kind of, even at the beginning of the book, Alex is saying, she's not my crush. She's my friend. Here's my crush down here. So it was, and I like that. I felt that that was a good way to go, because like you said, you don't see a lot of that, I don't think, or enough of it.
It's such a great question, because I actually remember really wanting to make sure that we dealt with that. And then when Mark said he was putting in the cartoon that said neighbor check, best friend check, crush no, that handled it right up front, so the reader didn't have to like wonder, because we were writing drafts when it wasn't quite handled up front. And yeah, it could have left that question in the mind.
Right, because they do both have their other crushes, so it's not like there's not, romance isn't part of the story. It is,
Right.
you know, and they're that age when that happens, that starts to happen, and you know, so yeah. But I did like that, you know, so the way you approached it.
So now
Thank you.
looking ahead, is this going to be part of a series? Is it going to be, you know, we're going to have 6th grade, 7th grade? Are we going to go through college, grad school? You know, well,
Retirement.
If you buy enough of these books, then yes.
so is there anything in the works? Is there anything you could talk about, or is it has it been discussed?
I mean, Kim and I have talked about it, but everything is, I know I said if you buy enough books, but literally, if it sells well enough, then they'll ask for another book. So, I mean,
Well,
it's
it's a good thing
we're
you're on this
ready to do,
podcast. So yeah.
yeah. Well, you know, either way would work too. We could continue this story. They could still be in 5th grade, or they could be in 6th grade, or it could be like a prequel in 4th grade, or but one thing I've noticed, which I don't know if you have, Kim, is that some people will look at the title and go, "Oh, this book is just for 5th graders." So I have some talks lined up at schools, and I'm just speaking to the 5th grade class.
Interesting. So I just spoke to 400 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders at a school. And what I am finding is the majority of buyers, like when I did a bookstore event, was 4th graders. Like, oh, I want to know ahead of time.
That's what I would think. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I was experiencing. But I also had the 5th graders like, I'm going to check your work and see what we're like, see if it's true. But of course, it's early into 5th grade because the school year is just a couple months in.
True.
And then
Yeah.
I was delighted that 6th graders wanted to read it, because you know how children usually want to read up.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So the 6th graders were wanting to read, and yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, I would think, you know, it's that same age group, 8 to 12,
Correct.
you know, like the Marty Pants books, and, you know, that mid grade, I think they call it, middle grade.
You could have a crossover. You could have Marty Pants come in into their next book as a guest star.
I would
Well, this is
love
Marty
that.
Pants, a little older.
Okay.
I thought about that. I'm like, can I change his name to Marty Pants?
You know, or it could be crossover with Off the Mark, and that would get really weird really fast.
All right, that's my next book idea. Let me write that down.
Yeah, okay.
Speaking of which, we wanted to, you know, to talk about, I mean, you're both involved with a lot of other things. You know, what else is gestating or coming up outside of this, you know, in terms of other books, other projects, other, you know, in your case, Mark, other cartooning opportunities. Kim, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. So I also teach a picture book writing class for UCLA Extensions. And so I have right now, because I'm into the teaching mode, my brain is, right there with all of those lessons. And so now I have a few picture book ideas that I'm drafting. I have a middle grade project that I always go back to and think of, and I'm deep into it, but I haven't been able to put a bow on it. It's a haunting of the Ghost in the White House is the working title that I have. So
Nice.
this haunting book. And then of course, Mark, I have to confess, I'm already brainstorming what could the next truth about fifth grade look like. Sometimes I'll be on my walks and dictating to myself. So who knows if our book's already written? Perhaps you're writing it in your sleep.
Yeah, I mean, do your part and I'll jump in when you're ready.
I love it. Love
So,
it.
so
And
how
of
about you,
course, in
Mark?
my dream world, I write a picture book that Mark's illustrates.
Yeah, I'd be all for that.
Okay.
So Mark, tell us about other projects you've got in. Tell us how you keep the ideas fresh for Off the Mark after, is it 37 years? Is that the actual?
37, is that the math? I think it's 37. Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I know. I mean,
'Cause you started it when you were 4.
right. And the math does work out if you know that. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing Off the Mark single panel newspaper cartoon since 1987. And I did not know if I could keep going this long when I started. And I think it got to a point where I got confident. I used to get writer's block just all the time, and it was so scary. And I've gotten to a point now where it's like I was so upset so many times in my life, and I've always got to the other side that I just skipped the part about being upset. If I get writer's block, I'm like, I'll get over it, and I always do. So I luckily that stress part is not there anymore, and it works well with, like, I have some greeting card lines, and since it's a humor panel, it can I just pick whichever I think are the funniest ones, and I'll send to the greeting card company, and so it fits well on the front of greeting cards. So that's another way to use them. I'm hoping to work on some other books. I'm waiting for that inspiration. That okay, which and it's not always what story hasn't been done. It's kind of like, well, what's my version of that story? Because it's not like, okay, what has not been written about before? Good luck. Good luck finding that story.
Right.
So it's more like the twist of how your brain or what your story is compared to the way that other people write things.
Isn't that kind of like the gag cartoons, on the desert island or
Right, right,
the
exactly.
psychiatrist? It's like, they're still being done, right? I mean, desert island cartoons are still being done. So how can you do a new twist on an age-old gag?
Right, and that can be really satisfying because the bit like Desert Island gags have been done to death, and if you can think of one that you're like, oh, I've never seen this one before, then that's very satisfying because you don't have to. And I used to think that way. I used to think, okay, I did a cartoon about this. Now I have to think of something else. Now I have to think of another concept. But you can keep going back to the well on so many ideas. It's like never ending. Think of anything, and it's just like never ending jokes in that category. So
Have you ever like published one when you're found out later on you'd done it like 25 years ago and you
yes,
just forgot?
yes, yeah. After that happened, I don't know, a few years ago, and because I'll go through my sketchbook, and I keep a sketchbook, and if I have writer's block, sometimes I'll go back a few pages and I'll go, okay, did I miss any gags? And I'm like, oh, there's one I missed. And I drew it, but I hadn't missed it. I had just forgot that I drew it. And nobody called me out on it. Nobody said, hey, didn't you already do this? I'm like, but I was grateful that no one noticed. And I was also like, hey, how come no one noticed? Come on. You read my stuff or not?
Now,
All right.
speaking of the panel cartoons, and before we started recording, we hinted that this question was coming. Kim, do you have a favorite gag cartoon of Mark's or of somebody else? No pressure to choose Mark,
Well,
but we have a feeling you might.
I have two of Mark's that just always make me laugh, no matter how many times I relook at them. And one is where the pirate and another dad are standing outside of a hospital nursery, and the other dad says, "Which one's yours?" And wah 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 arg is just love it. Mark, that is so clever. And then the one I asked Mark to send to me, which is
Who is that? Is that an original Mark Parisi off the mark?
it is.
Nice.
Oh,
wow.
I
Oh, it's a
love
pretty-
it.
You have to read it because some of
Okay.
our viewers are only audio, not
It
video.
says, so it's balloon animals at a library, and the librarian says, "What did you think of the book?" And the balloon animal says, "So many twists and turns." So I love it.
Well,
And of
all the
course,
other
Mark
characters
signs
are
it.
just balloons.
What's that?
All the other characters are just balloons.
Oh, yes.
And the
so
one that
sorry.
says the twist and turn is the balloon. I gotta.
I wish I
Right.
had Mark
This-
just read it to you. But let me
Yes,
read you the
very
most
well.
important part. Two
Describing cartoons is difficult.
It is. Like, how did you think the audio narrator did in the book? Trying
Oh,
to
that is an excellent. Yeah, we got audiobook. This is the first time I've
Oh,
had an
interesting.
audiobook. Hilarious. Even if you've read the book, I highly recommend going back. Especially, I think my guy Kirby was great too. The woman who did yours was just like phenomenal. But to Kim's point,
Cassandra Morris. Shout out to Cassandra Morris.
there you go. To Kim's point, the story isn't told just in words. Like the illustrations also further the story. Sometimes are the punchlines and things like that. And I feel like it wasn't. I don't know for sure, but I feel like it wasn't translated for the audio reader. So some of the things that I wrote, some of the drawings I did that had the punchlines were not read. So there was one where at the end of a chapter, Alex says something like, yeah, I heard people change in 5th grade. My mother thinks that I've changed. And the picture is Alex in a shirt that he washed himself and it shrunk. It's up like this. And the mother's looking at him going, "Oh, you've grown so much in a short time," or something like that. So that's the joke of, you've changed so much. But in the audiobook, that part, all it says is, yes, my mother thinks that I've changed.
Right.
And
So
then there's no reference to the drawing. And I don't know if
People
it's
like, oh,
because
this
he
is
didn't know
very
how
deep.
to adapt that to, like, the stuff that he delivered is really fun. Like his delivery is perfect for, I think, the character.
But yeah, but it's very different than a book where the illustrations are just illustrations. Like in this case, they're literally part of the text.
So I mentioned that to Dave, and he goes, "Oh, thanks for letting me know. We got to keep an eye on this because we don't usually do audiobooks with the drawings are so important to the storytelling." So I said,
it is so hard to deliver like exactly the essence when you're taking in a picture.
"Yes,
Right?
And
Concisely with the funny, the whole thing.
Yeah, I said, if we do this again, I'm willing to interpret each drawing. Like I would write instead of I would put a Post-it note or something on and write, how I would deliver it if it wasn't a drawing. I think that's what they need. They need someone to kind of interpret the drawing for the person who's reading it. But other than that, the audiobook's fantastic.
It really is fantastic. And I do have to give a shout out to our narrators. Of course, with my son working in an audiobook studio, I listened to a lot of audiobooks, and I also checked out who Mark and I had like put as our first place options. And the studio owner, everybody worked at the studio, was like, Oh, yes, they are #1 professionals, and you'll be lucky if they have time and they do say yes, and they both ended up saying yes. Sadly, it wasn't produced at Mosaic Audio, which is the studio my son's at. But happily, we got those narrators. Kirby, what is Kirby's last name? Who
I was
read?
hoping you wouldn't ask.
Oh, I want to say Marcy,
How
but
many Kirby's are
I know,
doing
you know,
audio?
just one of the Kirby's out there. Okay, and then your comics, I wanted to look at your comics, Pete and Dave, when, you know, before coming on here, and I am laughing so hard because your comic where it's the toothpaste and the toothbrush, and they're like, I'm sorry, but can you put the genie back in the bottle, or some other analogy that's escaping me? And I was laughing so hard because I truly thought I'm the only one who's ever thought of the whole squeezing the toothpaste out of the tube thing. And I didn't realize it was such a like used thing. So you guys did that for me. Thank you for clarifying.
That's funny.
And
That's
everybody
so
knows
for
that.
those, just so
Was
just so
that-
you know this, so for when we do our single panels, so most of our strips are, you know, with characters and story and stuff like that. But we try to, you know, but we every so often we do one of these single panels trying to emulate Mark and the folks who do those for a living.
Love it.
But the way we do them is Dave draws them, and then I come up with a bunch of suggestions for him about possible captions, and then he picks the caption he wants to go
So
with
it's
it.
like a
sort of
caption contest.
Exactly. It's like
It's
the
like
New
our
Yorker
own
caption
personal
contest.
one, yeah. But
And
it's
you
just the two of
always
us,
win.
yeah. And we always win. But yeah, but it's not about us on the podcast, it's about you guys. So I want to get back to, but thank you. We very much
Yes,
appreciate that.
very
But
much appreciate that.
but I actually my question is going to be about Mark and drawing. But before I do that, Kim, it sounded like you on Mark's cartoon, he had written a message to you. It sounded like you were gonna read the
Oh,
message he wrote.
it
I just want to make sure
was.
you do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. To Kim, the best partner, you're blowing it up. So thank you.
Nice. Have you guys actually ever met in person? Because we're on Zoom right now, obviously.
No,
Yeah.
we have only met on Zoom.
Kim invited me to the book launch party in Arizona, but couldn't make it. So
Yeah, well, for the
It's
next
on
book
Book
launch,
Festival.
Yeah, or
The
you
next book launch.
Gloucester is beautiful this time of year. You should come out here, Kim.
I should. We have to find an event or
Yeah.
get into
Or-
the Princeton.
come out to the
Children's Book
Rubens.
Festival.
Come to the Rubens.
Yeah, the Rubens are in
next year.
Boston.
They're in Boston. Come on out.
oh yeah.
Hey, thank you. I'll tell the Reuben people that you guys invited me.
Absolutely.
And I'll try to draw something.
All right. Next question for Mark. Mark, let's talk about materials. This is sort of my go-to question on every podcast. What are your go-to materials? Are you analog? Are you digital? I know the answer to this, but I'm teeing it up for those who don't know. Tell us about your drawing tools and what you used specifically for this particular book.
I draw digitally now. I used to draw, of course, when you're doing it for 37 years, you didn't always draw digitally. But when I started doing the Marty Pants books, the first book, I didn't draw digitally. And I was drawing and scanning and drawing. There's like multiple illustrations on each page. So the drawing and scanning and cleaning up and drawing and scan, it drove me insane. And so I got a Cintiq tablet for the second book, and I couldn't believe how efficient it was compared to, just drawing and scanning. And I never went back. It wasn't, I'm usually a creature of habit, so it takes me forever to learn a new thing because I'm so used to being an automatic and doing things a certain way. But once I started using drawing digitally on the Cintiq, I never went back to paper. So that's what I've used with this book. And it really does, it lightens the load so much.
Now, are you a Cintiq user who also has a portable Cintiq, a separate tablet to bring so you can do it outside of your house, or are you just limited to the big motherboard in your house?
I got a portable one, and it hooks up to the laptop, and you kind of use it as, you know, the monitor and you can draw on it. But recently it stopped working and I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was an upgrade with Apple or if it was something with Photoshop or if it was something with the Cintiq. That there's so many variables that
Maybe you just stop paying your electric bill.
well, that's probably the most likely one. Yeah, right there. So yeah, so when I can, I do. I like to, because sometimes I just have to get out of the house because, you know, just as I have a cat, but you know, but when there's no energy, like I like people being around, the energy of that. I don't like them necessarily approaching me, so I put the earbuds in, and I like the energy of being somewhere where there's, you know, energy and action, but also being isolated at the same time. And that's how I like to work. Unless I'm at home at night, then I can work pretty well at night when everyone else is in bed and I don't get interrupted. That's kind of
Do you ever bring it to like the local coffee shop, earbuds in, just, you know, famous
yeah,
cartoonist in
yeah,
action?
that's where I was before I came here.
All right, turning back to Pete for the next question.
Believe it or not, we have come to the end of another episode of Strip Search. This was
We just got started.
It feels like we just got started, but this was terrific. I can't thank both of you enough for coming on. It's just such a great project that gets the Strip Search seal of approval for anybody you know, with middle grade readers out there. But before we go, what else that we haven't discussed do people need to know about the truth about fifth grade, or about any other ways to find you and learn more about both of your work?
Well, the first thing that you need to know is, for sure, it is Charlie's version that is accurate. Just like that's true. I have a website, I'm on Instagram, and yeah.
Give
How
us your
about you, Mike?
website. Plug.
Oh, KimTomsic.com. TOMSIC. There's no H in there.
Alex is actually the hero of the book, and he's the one who is the smartest and has his story straight the entire time. Just want to make that clear. You can find my work at on Instagram. I think it's Mark_Parisi_OTM, or Off the Mark, and offthemark.com, and on Facebook, and you know, all the most of the socials.
And people can get the book at their local bookstores, support our
Yeah, it should be.
independence, get them at the
Yep.
big one if you have to, but go out and buy this book.
Yes, if you can find it in your local bookstore, go there. If not, it's available online.
And you can go to your local bookstore and they'll have it in 2 days if they don't have it now.
Yes.
Got to support those independent bookstores. That's the other thing when you come out to visit Boston, Kim. We are having a little bit of a bookstore boom out here. There's been a whole bunch of new bookstores that have opened up in Boston and greater Boston the last couple of years. So I take that as a good sign.
That is a great sign.
And of course, we will have on our website, petpeevescomic.com/podcast. We will have this interview along with links to all of those sites that were just mentioned, samples of from the book and of Mark's other cartoons. And we encourage you to come visit there. And in the meantime, we will be back with another episode of Strip Search. We have I'm not going to sort of take the cat out of the bag. We have a very special guest.
We're not going to take the toothpaste out of the tube.
That's right. Or the genie out of the bottle.
Right.
But we have a very
Put it
special
in
guest
that way.
for the December episode of Strip Search. So stay tuned for who that is. Come to petpeevescomic.com for all the latest updates. You could also sign up for our newsletter there if you want to know who's been on and who will be on upcoming podcasts. Thank you, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see all of you soon. Take care.